And we're here. Good afternoon, everyone. This is how you call just going as soon as you appear on the screen. We had all sorts of stuff going on in the backgrounds today, but it's Uncommon Sense number 63. Unfortunately, we're back in our homes. Unfortunately, we're no longer in the sunshine of California, but it's Craig Gamanis and Dean Holmes here with you again for another exciting episode of Uncommon Sense. So today we thought we would get some inspiration from a meeting Dean had with his business coaching crew earlier this week. And ladies and gentlemen, it's all about the dollars and the cents. And are we charging enough? Are we not charging? Are we charging too much? Are we charging consistently? Are we not consistent? And all of those kind of things. So welcome, Dean. Great to have you here, mate. Why don't you kick us off today with our pricing chat?
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Craig. And hello to our listeners that are online right at the moment watching on LinkedIn. If you've got any questions, of course, stick it in the chat of LinkedIn and we'll pick those up along the way. But the first thing, Craig, that I wanted to talk about in terms of pricing was just to put pricing into a bit of context in relation to Robinhood. And so Robinhood, as we know, used to steal from the rich and give to the poor in the context of the fable. And there's a little bit of that going on in relation to financial advice practices if they're actually not charging enough for a client relationship. And so I wanted to talk about who, if the advisor is Robinhood, who they're actually stealing from and who they're giving to as a result. And this was a good kind of analogy just for us to think about who all the impacted people are as a result of you undercharging a particular client. So who you're stealing up from, first and foremost, you're stealing from you as the business owner / advisor. Potentially you could break those into two, but you're definitely stealing from yourself in terms of being the advisor and business owner. You're stealing your time because you're not valuing it, so it's going to someone else. You're stealing your profit because you're not going to be as profitable as a result of undercharging, and you're stealing your happiness. So the frustration that you might have of a particular client is only going to be compounded if you're undercharging that particular client at the same time. And so the first category of people that you're stealing from as an advisor undercharging is stealing from yourself. The second category of people that you're stealing from, Craig, in this analogy, is you're stealing from your staff. And so the way in which you're stealing from your staff is a couple of different things. But firstly, your staff are going to learn to value, or more importantly, they're going to learn to undervalue what you and your business does, okay? Because you're undercharging that particular client. There's going to be some frustration that happens in your team because that client is going to ask for things. And the attitude will be, well, they're not even paying enough, so why should I do that type of work? And so that's going to create some, animosity within the team towards that particular client. And so you're stealing from your client, your staff, by not having them see the value that you're creating for that particular client. And finally, you are stealing from your clients in this Robinhood strategy as well, because you're essentially saying to your client pool, some clients I'm going to charge fully and some clients I'm going to discount because those clients won't pay my proper fee. And so the Robinhood strategy that does happen in businesses today is that the highest revenue clients are often compensating for the lowest revenue clients. And so if you went and spoke to and saw your top clients and broke that down to them, saying that a portion of their fee is actually coming to the business such that I can then give service to lower clients, they probably would say that that's not fair or that's not what they agreed to when they signed on to their particular fee. And so the Robinhood analogy, Craig, is all about understanding those three parties and that we're stealing from those in a couple of different ways. And the call out is that that's not fair.
Yeah, no, mate, I agree with you. And I think they're three great analogies for people to actually stop and think about as they think through these things. I think one of the things I always think of when, doing strategy planning with an advice firm, we spend some time talking about value creation and value capture. And, why should it be the advice firm that's just creating all the value and then the client who's capturing all the value. That strategically doesn't work. And that then drives into the concept of everything you do needs to be win-win.
Yep.
Right. So that the client's winning and the firm's winning. Otherwise, strategically, you're just not going to drive a successful outcome into the future. And, this win-win comes down to, well, is your pricing right? So we know you're creating a ton of value for the client through the process you take them through the advice you give, through how you're setting them up for their future, or how you're dealing with their instantaneous piece of advice that they need on the spot. We know that. But then when it comes to capturing it, you can't let the client just capture all of that value. You need to win with them. And so therefore you need to price appropriately, and you need to make sure that, you're capturing out of that value what you need for your firm as well. Otherwise, you're stealing from those three things that Dean's just mentioned. Going back on that. And I did have two things, Dean, but I got three. The second one is, I often sit back and watch it, and we might pick up on this later in the chat, but sometimes I see advisors nervous about what they want to charge. And so they might put a range in their documents to try and cover through, this is where I kind of want to charge, because I don't want to be direct and sort of up front about it. Lose the range. Tell them what it is. Move on with it.
Well, the range, Craig, if you give me a range of, if I told you it'll be between $6,000 and $8,000, when you leave the meeting, the one number, you've only remembered one number, and you've only remembered six.
Yeah.
And you have to remember from the client perspective, Craig, is like, if you give me a range, I don't think I'm that complicated. Every client in the world doesn't think they're that complicated, right? So if you give me a range and then you say between 6 and 8, and you give me, and then you come back in 8, you actually have to explain to the client why they're more complicated than the 6.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas you're better off, therefore, just giving a price.
Yep. So hashtag ban the range.
Ban the range. Absolutely.
And then,
or make the range so tight that it doesn't actually matter.
Correct. Exactly right. And then, the one thing I always then say, and, quite often said this to, younger advisors starting up when they're thinking about how they deliver the pricing conversation. And I just sort of sit with them and I ask them this question, and that is, what right do you have to decide what the client's going to pay? It's not your decision to make. You know what it needs to cost. You should tell them that and let them make the decision as to whether that's what they're paying or not.
Yeah.
And don't hide from it.
Absolutely. So there's a few push-ups required sometimes, Craig, but that's a practice in terms of that. So I love that value capture analogy, because if we think about other industries, and one came to mind while you're talking about it, is that there's other industries out there that literally write into their agreements that they intend to make a profit. And and it's not that it shouldn't be there, you know what I mean? So like a builder will put in a builder's margin on the margin across everything that they do when they kind of come in and renovate your house. So it might be a $500,000 cost of renovation, and they're being the middleman of all of that. They'll charge a project management fee, which is a fixed fee, and then they'll charge a builder's margin, which might be 5% of turnover. And so they're doing that, and it's in the contract, and it's known what the profit margins are as a result. I know other services I've signed up is that I've literally had a conversation with the owner, and he said, I intend to make a 40% profit margin. And I was like, I'm okay with that. That's what it should be for all businesses. So I'll sign up to your service. So not saying we have to specifically say to our clients that we intend to make a 40% profit margin on the work or the fee that I'm charging. But the clients should have a reasonable expectation that you are making a profit on the price that you've charged them. That's the sharing of that value.
Yeah. And I think it kind of works in reverse, Dane. I'll deflect a little bit, but like these companies that come in with this big price, and this isn't financial advice firms. They're like, let's go, I wanted roofing repairs done at my mother-in-law's house, right? And the guy came out and did the measures, then he sat down at the table and he went, here's the big number, right? Both of us knowing that's not the number. Right.
Oh, the strategy. You mean a sales strategy? Yeah.
And so let's think about this, right? And so then next, I'll call the owner and tell him I've quoted, and you play this game, and like now that he's on the phone, and so I played and said, well, tell him to give me something to make me do it today, right? And we ended up with and I learned from that, like, don't play that game. Like it actually stinks. It's
Yeah.
awful. And if he'd just given me a price that was reasonable in the first place and said, that's the price and this is what you're getting, and I perceive the value in that, then I would have just bought it. And we would have saved 35 minutes of toying around.
Doing
Now,
it
I know we
right.
don't do that in advice, but I think the message from that is deliver your price, back up what it is you believe in. And if the clients perceive the value, they're going to pay for it.
Yeah. And so from my perspective, what's important at that point, especially when you go from having one advisor to two advisors in your
Yeah.
practice, is actually having a pricing policy that is understood and shared by all. So the idea that two advisors are making up prices, or lo and behold, 10 advisors making up 10 different pricing, is something that the business owners can't handle. And so the two concept that I have in and around this is having a pricing policy and then having a menu of, I call it the menu, but it's, your actual prices. But
Yeah.
this pricing policy, Craig, is making sure that similar clients are paying the same. That's actually equality in pricing. There's probably something in the code of ethics that also says around that. No deviation from these set prices without prior approval from your partner, your business coach, or your wife, one of those three, so that you can actually have set some rules that you can't breach without talking to a friend. And then the final thing around this pricing policy that I think happens from time to time is the downgrading of services. So, the Netflix high definition 4 channels at the same time is the most expensive and premium service. But sometimes you realize you don't need that. You actually will watch the Netflix with ads. And so this can happen in advice as well, Craig, where you've got a couple of different packages with different fees, and the advisor is actually selecting the client to go into the wrong package. So they're selling the easier package to sell when actually they needed to sell the more complicated, higher price, higher service package. And so that's a difficult one for advice business owners to identify, because it kind of gets hidden. So having the pricing policy and being firm on the menu, which we might come up to, but the menu around who it is, what type of clients fit into the particular menu classes, and then what the fee is, I think is pretty important there.
Yeah, and I think this is time for, again, Dean, hashtag ban the range, because
Yes.
sometimes I see firms with pricing policies and it has a range. So if you've got a client that looks like this, it could be this to that, and guaranteed the newer people to it. And sometimes the older people, because they'll just have a weak moment potentially, they'll pick the lower end of the range every single time. So again, your pricing policy has to kind of be, have you done the hard work? Have you worked with someone like Dean who can show you how to process it out and go, what does it actually cost? Where do we get to? What is it? And actually have figures on it that says, if I'm giving you this advice, it costs X, not between here and there.
Absolutely. And so to go down into this point is that we want to be professionals. And so if the industry professionalizes over time, what that means is that we should be the best at understanding our cost to serve, not anyone else. And so if the variations in the work that we do are frankly minimal, because really it revolves around meetings, service, and complexity of problems, which we should be able to identify and understand up front. So one of the things that happens as a result of that, Craig, is being able to articulate what the service is. And I think that this is a challenge for everyone, in that we're selling, that we're selling the ice to Eskimos somewhat, in terms of we struggle to sell the intangible of what we do to clients, because they can't see it and feel it. And so as a result of that, sometimes it is difficult to communicate the price and value to clients. And that's what we need to work on. And so having this menu approach to professional services means that we've actually got, from my perspective, service packages. So we can point to a package, and then we can say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you fit into that package. And when you've got 2 or 3 packages on the page, it's not the range thing, Craig, of going that, but you are putting package A or package B on the screen. And then you are actually talking to the differences as to why they fit into one over the other, which I think is okay. But that once the client understands what the service that they will be delivered, they can then see the differences in the packages. If your packages actually end up being the same, but just with different prices to them, you've got a problem with your how you're packaging up everything.
Yep. Yeah, definitely, mate. And we know through past experience that this is a whole heap of time invested in. This is very, very worthwhile, because once the machine works, or the system works, we often quite say the system runs the business, the people run the system. This is one of those systems that's critical, particularly as you grow. And if you follow the system, you don't have to worry about it day to day.
Yeah, exactly.
This
Exactly.
is the
So often it's the story in the head as well, Craig. Like so I have this quote about people buying on price in the absence of them understanding the value that you're bringing to them. So
yeah,
really, the important part of your time with a client is making sure they understand the value. And one of this is a slight digression, but what often happens in client meetings is that the advisor and the client are having a great enjoyable time. Like, it's a great experience. Like, oh, Craig, you're really happy. Me, the advisor's going, oh, Craig's amazing. We really get on. I can solve lots of his problems. Let me ask him a little bit more about his goals and objectives. So we're really connecting and all those things. And then we look at my watch. I look at my watch and I'm like, I've got 5 minutes to go. And what the advisor does in the last 5 minutes is rush the close. And
yeah,
so by virtue of rushing the close, what ends up happening is you don't spend enough time articulating the value. And the only thing you do is tell the clients the price. And so whilst Craig will end the call going, Dean was a really nice guy. Like, we really connected. But the end of the day, all he knows is the price, not the value that I'm going to create by having a working relationship. And so my view in this is actually to stop doing goals at a particular point in the meeting. So, Craig might be having a great yarn about all the things you want to achieve and stuff like that. But with 20 minutes to go, I clap my hands and I'm moving on to the next part of the meeting. And so I just go like this and go, Craig, that's really good. But what we're going to do next is we're going to move on to another section where I can explain how we work together, the value that we create over time, and how our fees work as part of the process, if that's okay with you. And you go, yeah. And so the next phase of that process is spending 20 minutes. I think you spend 20 minutes explaining to the clients what the journey is to work with a financial advisor. Most clients have never met an advisor before, so they have no idea of how many meetings you want to have with them. So you talk about the journey. That then allows you to talk about the problems you solve, the value you create, and then you can put a fee in context with the value that you create over time. So that's kind of one thing around the value, Craig, that I see is that advisors don't spend enough time in that last bit of the meeting to make sure that the client leaves the meeting with all of the information. I know Craig likes me. I know, there's a connection. He can solve my problems. I now understand the journey and the product and service that goes with that. And I understand how the fees work in context for that journey. And so for me, that's one thing that the advisors can reflect on as an action in terms of how they're running their meetings to articulate that value as they go. And then often there's a bit of the story in their head that clients won't pay that because they're, you're in South Australia. So I get this often is like the South Australian advisors going, oh, my clients down here wouldn't pay that. And I'm like, well, how much is a cup of coffee, Craig, in Adelaide? And it's probably you're an espresso man, but it's probably $4.50, $5. Petrol is the same in Adelaide.
Yep.
The minimum wage is the same in Adelaide. Interest rates are the same in Adelaide. And most importantly, Net Wealth or Hub24 or CFS charge the same. So there's very little postcode discounts provided to clients, but yet for some reason, as the professional service, we think that there needs to be a discount. And so I think that's a story in our head predominantly that we need to change. narrative around, because it's not applicable in this day and age. There should be a postcode related discount for what you do.
Yeah, and mate, as you've been talking about this stuff, it got me thinking of years back when I had an employed advice team that I was working with, and from time to time you go and sit on client meetings and that type of thing. And I remember sitting on a really big strategy meeting with a client where the advice was being presented, and obviously the advice was in one of those documents that we need to use. That was sitting on the table, and they'd gone through it. And this was the old way of kind of charging too, where you'd kind of present the advice and then saying, this is what it will cost to implement it. And it was a pretty significant advice fee. Like, it was in the tens of thousands of dollars because that's what it should have been because of the complex strategies. And I always remember sitting there, and the client, the advisor did a really nice way to introduce the fee to the client. And then the client went, can we think about it? I don't know if the can we think about it exists as much anymore, because I think more and more businesses have got a bit sharper in terms of the process leading up to that. But if there is a can we think about it moment, this is what I learned from that. And the advisor I was with went down the path, well, of course you can. I've given you all this information. And I'm just sitting there going, can we think about it, right? And I'm looking at this document on the table that's got every bit of IP in it sitting on their side of the table. And they're just about to leave. And I just had this moment where I leant across the table and I grabbed the document and I pulled it back over to this side. And everyone's face is like, what are you doing? And I said, well, you want to think about it? Yeah. So, well, I'm taking this back. So think about it.
Yep.
Oh, so we don't get to take that document? I said, you do if you give us 80% of the fee that the advisor quoted today. Then you can take this document. But if you're not going to pay anything today and you need to think about it, I can't let you leave here with this document.
Yep.
And they ended up just going ahead and putting it all in place. But
this
lesson I learned, and I don't know why it came over me to grab it. It's just something that hit. But don't let them walk away and capture all the value and not even pay you for it. Like,
correct. So
it needs to be.
I had a great similar analogy around the fee and the value. And so there was a post on LinkedIn recently, just in the last couple of days actually, which was talking about that an advisor was able to identify and implement a strategy in 2 minutes. And what the advisor was actually crediting was that Macquarie Bank has great technology that allowed him to do it. But I took the post slightly differently when I read the post, in that they missed the opportunity to communicate two things, which was their experience of being an advisor for the last 15 years allowed them to identify that opportunity quickly. Okay. And then their experience in choosing the right technology partners allowed them to implement that advice quickly. And so the two was quite different. Is like, hey, I got this advice and I did it for my client in 2 minutes. And because you mentioned 2 minutes, what should the client pay for that? Even if you're at $1,000 an hour, they're paying $20 for that advice. Now, that's not right. So I was calling out the not attaching your fees at all to the price. Sorry, at all to the time that you might spend, because the clients owe you for the experience of what you've built up over the years. And so I wanted the same post to be shared if I was writing it, essentially saying that because of my experience, I was able to identify these opportunities, because of my network, I was able to implement these opportunities, and we created this much value for the client as a result. And so both of those stories, Craig, end up being about the same thing, as making sure we're getting that value exchange at the right time. You were like, I need to get the fee if you want the value. Absolutely. We probably give away a little bit too much free advice over the years. But conversely, we don't articulate the value properly as well. By saying something took 2 minutes, it's not true that it took 2 minutes. And it's actually starting to undervalue everything that advisor does, because the client goes, does everything he does take 2 minutes? Like, how much am I paying for minutes? Which is not what it's about. And so that keeps coming back to this articulation and understanding of value and experience in a client relationship. And experience is not gray hairs, as you and I can attest to. We have very little gray hairs. The experience is actually knowing that you've done the work, you've seen the scenarios, and you've got a network of experience as well. Because, if you see a cardiologist these days, they will be in their late 20s at best, but they will have a network behind them that when it's a complicated deal or complicated medical issue, they're able to go to that network and get the right answer. And we feel perfectly comfortable with that. Same thing for the younger advisors. You have the ability to leverage off exactly the same network at that point in time.
Absolutely, mate. And probably a lovely place to wrap up. Hey, so like a shout out to the firms who have got this in place. Congratulations. You know what you're worth. You know what you're charging. If you're a larger firm, you've got a policy in place, a philosophy to follow, and the team is humming and following that. Big shout out to you. A shout out to the people who are still battling away with it and wanting to implement it and do those things. Dean and I are here for you. If you want to chat through anything, you can drop us a DM or whatever they call it these days. And
we just do email, but yeah, DM
email
is
or phone call even. Pick up the phone and chat. But like, I know we talk about it like it should be easy, but it's not always easy. And it's okay to battle with it, but reach out and get that help and speak to someone to help you get to the other side on it, because it's just going to be one of those items that makes your firm great.
Yep, absolutely. Well said. So Craig, that was number 63. We're running a few more through till Christmas, of course, and then having our Christmas break. But if anyone has any topic ideas, feel free to reach out and share, and we can deep dive into those particular issues. And if you're watching and say, well, I'd love to be on YouTube with Dean and Craig once as a special guest star, also feel free to reach out. Our media team will be in touch, and then we can get a time for that's Bentley, by the way, but we will get in touch and get you locked in as well. So we always love to share the microphone with a few people in the industry as well.